Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It's really, really nice to see you all from many different parts of the world. I'm gonna start sharing my presentation because I want to show you quite a few things. So feel free to post comments. I might respond to some, to many. I love commenting on your comments, by the way. But I might be answering most questions towards the end of the session. So welcome to this session about lesson planning and pronunciation. I chose this topic because I'm passionate about lesson planning. I love lesson planning. Maybe I'm one of the 4 people in the world that love lesson planning. Maybe you do as well. So welcome to the club, a very exclusive club of lesson planning lovers. And pronunciation is my other passion. So I decided to put them together, and this is my baby, this webinar that you're attending. So in a couple of minutes, I'm going to show you the steps that we're going to follow in this session. But first, I want to ask you a favor. I want to collect tips from you. I want to collect ideas from you because we're going to need them later on in the session. Okay, so let's just keep moving. This is what I want your help with. I want you to think of your go-to pronunciation activity. Let's think of one. And it can be receptive or productive pronunciation activities that help learners to, better perceive, better decode, or activities that help your learners to better produce specific features. And I want you to take some time to share it with us. I'm using a Padlet this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are, and I think it's a lovely idea to share with everybody after the session. I'm gonna show you first what it looks like, and then I'm gonna share the link with you. So it looks like this. Hopefully you can see it. It has a title on the top, embedding pronunciation into our lesson planning, our lesson plan. And I already left a specific idea. It's my go-to. And there I tell you that I look for a video on YouTube, random videos. The last one I used was I Have a Dream, the speech by Martin Luther King. And I gave them a bit of the script of the speech, and I asked them to find pauses he made, but they also had to tell me why they thought he made those pauses. So you can see that that's a very quick focus on perception, a very quick focus on reception. So there you have it, already an activity by, no, not yet. This is just the beginning. Now I'm gonna share my link to this Padlet. You will have access to during the session and after the session. So you'll have hundreds of ideas possibly. So here you are. Let me share with everyone. You just need to click on the button, on the plus button on the bottom of the page. Nice to meet you. Yes. Hi everybody. I can see lots of people already typing. Thank you so much. As you input your ideas, I'm gonna go back to my presentation. And we'll check your ideas later on because we're gonna need them anyway. Remember, if I say something that you're not so clear about, that you don't fully understand, just ask the question, use the Q&A option, right? Oh yeah, I also had the QR code. I anticipated the problem of using the URL. All right, so coming up, on this show. We're gonna outline some guiding principles in lesson planning. These are principles that I follow. These are principles that I love and I love talking about. So that's why these are the ones I'm gonna show you today. We're going to set out some game rules for pron work, for pronunciation work in our lesson plan. And I tend to use these pron work rules, the game rules, every time I think of suitable activities, suitable pron activities that I can insert, that I can embed into my plan. So let's have a look. Feel free to comment on them whenever you see one of the rules, or feel free to be critical or to praise them. We're gonna collectively brainstorm available teaching options. Actually, we are already doing it for people who are leaving ideas on the Padlet. And I see that lots of you are already using the chat box for leaving ideas. And we are also going to practice some of the skills, some of the planning skills that we review throughout the session. So this is going to be a very active session. It requires, it demands work from all of us. So I hope you're ready wherever you are, morning, afternoon, evening. I see that you're very excited, saying hello to everybody. So let's begin by talking a little bit about lesson planning, and feel free to also supplement my ideas with your own insights, with your own perspectives. So let me tell you about the first thing. The plan is an organic process. It's not necessarily formal. So when people hear lesson planning, they usually think about the piece of paper. They think about the formal activity of planning a lesson. People who are doing teaching qualifications like CELTA, Delta, Trinity, CERT, TESOL, they immediately associate lesson planning with the long essays and with pages and pages of thinking about language skills, thinking about students, writing learner profiles. But to be honest, lesson planning can be informal or formal. The moment you think about activities that you want to do in your lesson, that's lesson planning. Where you are in your classroom and you see that your students are struggling a bit more than you anticipated, and you decide to change something, that's lesson planning, and it's happening during the lesson. So I want you to remember that even when you write down the running order of your activities, when you decide that you're going to focus on a specific point, that's lesson planning, and you don't even need to produce a fully formatted, super structured plan, because the activity of lesson planning happens mostly here in your head, of course. So remember that. The plan should respond to your learners' needs. Of course, that's the basics of teaching, and the plan should respond to their needs in many, many ways. Maybe maybe you've witnessed how they respond to activities that you carry out. They respond well, you do it again. They don't respond that well, you adjust it. Or you also do needs analysis. If you're planning a lesson formally, you set out to understand your learner's needs. So it always has to be responsive. Your plan has to be responsive all the time. Even if it's just you on a Saturday morning, an hour before class, thinking of what to do. Even that type of thinking, even that, on the spot lesson planning has to be responsive. Otherwise, I'm not sure the learners are going to get a whole lot from a plan, from a sequence of activities, from tasks that are not thought out for them. The next one, adapt. Feel free to adapt the plan as you teach. What I see a lot, what I see very often in observations I carry out, observations of teaching, is that teachers feel the need when they submit a lesson plan, they feel the need to do every single activity they've planned in exactly the way they wrote it. Many teachers get anxious about deviating, and I think you can don't take it easy, don't totally relax, but feel free to look at your students, see your students, notice how they're reacting, notice how they're responding to what you do and to what they're doing, and decide to change things a little bit. Or if you have an activity too many, if you think you are running out of time and you haven't done something, think twice before trying to rush through the last activity only to impress an observer or only to demonstrate that you can do it. It's better, it's best to think of the learners. You are teaching the lesson for the learners. You're not teaching it for an observer. You're not teaching it for an administrator, okay? Um, I hope I'm not getting anyone in trouble for saying that. It's just a principle of teaching. The next one, yes, talking about principles of teaching and getting people in trouble. If you are institutionally constrained because you have to follow the syllabus just because, yeah, you can follow the syllabus. You can totally follow. You can try to get your learners to achieve the aims that your school has set out, has requires everybody to achieve. But you can also embed activities you think will work best. You can also look for the little corners to adapt and to introduce activities that you prefer, activities that you know will work better. I like that comment, by the way. Yes, learners are inspiration, a source of inspiration. Love it. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Generally, a teacher should plan. You should have an idea of what's going to happen, what's going to happen in your class. Otherwise, it may be mayhem. Who knows? The next one, I have a few more. Lessons should have a clear sense of direction. Yes, thank you. Exactly what you were commenting on. Even if you don't write a learning aim at the beginning, even if you're not producing a formal lesson plan, you need to have an idea of what you want your learners to achieve. And not necessarily at the end of the lesson, but all through the lesson. So if you think of 4 activities, your lesson is mostly made up of 4 activities. Why do they need each of those activities, and what are they gaining with each of those? Always ask the question, why do we need this activity? Is this activity truly necessary? Is it just random filler? So yeah, ask yourself the hard-hitting questions, because mayhem might be the consequence of not asking yourself the questions. Yes, talking about activities and the possibilities of adaptation. If you plan, we were talking about those 4 or 5 activities, they should be sequenced in a way that each activity prepares learners to tackle the following activity. That has to do a little bit with scaffolding, right? We have an end goal, a learning aim for those people doing cert or diploma or delta. You have the main aim. And then you have a number of activities, a number of smaller steps that prepare your learner to achieve the next step, to step on the next rung of the ladder. Okay, I stopped seeing your comments, but I want to see them. I want to keep seeing them. Yes. Yes, I love that comment. Lesson planning shows where our learners are in the time. Yes. I have more. Timing, I mean, be flexible. Here, somebody's asking me in the Q&A, flexibility. Yes, think of timing, but only in the sense of generally anticipating how long a specific task might take, but feel free not to be bound by the constraints of time. Just try and anticipate in the sense that you are structuring a lesson, right? If you have a demanding, productive activity, a challenging, productive task, core task towards the end of the lesson, then you should leave some considerable time for that because it might take time. But in a formal lesson plan for a formal observation, do I have to stick to the time just because? You can try, but you could also just respond to the learners, what they're giving you. If activities are extra challenging, well, maybe they need more time. If activities are actually easier than anticipated, maybe you just need to move on. Maybe you just need to give some sort of extension or move on to the next activity. Yes, yes, yes. I like all the comments. I love that comment about a lesson plan being a series of steps. So many comments. I start reading one and then there are 100 more. Yes, and my last guiding principle, remember, these are my personal favorites, the principles that I keep in my heart. Vary the activity types that you bring to the lesson, because if you keep bringing the same type of activities, the same type of interactions between learners, the lesson might be a bit monotone and it might be a bit boring. And not only for your students, it can be boring also for you. And we want to avoid that. We want to avoid anyone getting bored, anyone getting disengaged. We want to maximize engagement. And sometimes to maximize engagement, we need to keep people on their toes. How do we keep people on their toes? Giving them the unexpected. And what do I mean by the unexpected? Just a different type of activity, just a different type of task, just a different type of interaction. Sometimes I see lessons where students speak to a partner, then they work in groups, then they speak to a partner again, and then they work in groups, and then they speak to a partner. While that is good in principle because your learners are interacting with each other, they're also falling into a pretty monotone interaction pattern that might reduce engagement for some anyway. All students are different as well, and some students might want something that is more monotone. It really depends on the students you have. I love that comment. That summarizes everything. I think lesson planning helps us. Yes, lesson planning helps us. The final thing I'm going to say about this slide is that lesson planning really does help us develop an understanding of what type of activities work well together, what types of activities don't work well, and what type of activities are particularly liked by specific learner groups and the ones that specific learner groups hate doing. Lesson planning also gives you, it becomes second nature choosing lesson frameworks for specific language points. So lesson planning is not just about putting some activities together. It is a cognitive higher order thinking skill that teaches us how to put a lesson together. So yeah, it's huge. It is a huge subject. It is a huge topic for us teachers. But I think it's time to move on to a little bit of pronunciation. If these are my lesson planning principles, what about the pronunciation principles? Well, let's have a look. So I'm going to give you some of my prawn work game rules. Oops, sorry. So yes, I'll show you some situations throughout the session, and I'm going to ask you to help me make some planning choices, okay? Sometimes I'm just going to launch polls. Sometimes I'm going to ask for your opinions, because I know that you like typing away your perspectives on everything we share here. So for every decision we make, keep the following in mind. And these are, remember, the prawn work game rules. Feel free to agree, disagree, praise, or critique. So these are the first three. Think about intelligibility and how intelligibility is the key of teaching pronunciation. Helping our learners reach a more intelligible pronunciation in general is the core goal of teaching pronunciation in our classrooms. Yeah, that's it. However, there are ways of attaining intelligibility, and of course, there are many different ways of doing it. You are giving me, you're leaving ideas on my Padlet on how to work receptively, how to help learners listen to specific features better, how to help them decode whole messages better, but also to help them produce specific features better. Features that are important for international intelligibility, and that's why I'm showing and mentioning the lingua franca core. According to the lingua franca core, I'm sure many of you know, some features are more important. Some pronunciation features are more important for international intelligibility. Should we ignore the other features? Not really. Lingua franca core is just a list of priorities, pronunciation priorities, and these are some of those priorities. Vowel length is a priority, talking about how a vowel becomes longer before a voiced consonant, or how a vowel becomes shorter before a voiceless consonant, for example. Or the pronunciation of all consonants seems to be key for international intelligibility. Two exceptions, the interdentals, the th sounds, both the voiced one and the voiceless one. Yes, I'm getting some disagreement in the chat box. Yes, I live for the disagreement. And it all depends on what your learners need, ladies and gentlemen. It all depends on your class. You can't take a theoretical proposal and bring it to the class and say, this is what we're gonna do, because we have to listen to what our learners need and what they want. We also have sentence prominence. Sentence prominence is as in how you show, how you highlight important information in your sentences. That's really, really important. Because if you say something like, I love, and you don't highlight the object of that sentence, then we'll never find out what I love. So prominence enables us to highlight, to mark, to front important key info that we want to convey. All right, there are a few more things though, a few more principles I want to share, a few more pron work game rules. The first one, you have them all there. Raise learners' awareness of pron features. It is okay to tell them about the features and to get them to listen to the features. At the beginning, I was giving you my own tip about the pausing. Well, get them to listen to someone who uses pausing very effectively, very efficiently. What is effective pausing? Effective pausing, well, helps you introduce important information, right? I'm being overtly dramatic tonight or this afternoon or this morning. If I say, this session is about the teaching of pronunciation. So my use of pausing there is to introduce, to highlight key info. And the fact that I got you to listen to me and to pay attention to the pause is just raising your awareness of it, right? There should be some perception, some receptive training, like you should expose learners, we should expose learners to pronunciation features, not in isolation, of course, because that's not really possible, but in the texts that we bring to class. I'm talking about the auditory, the oral texts that we bring to class. Guys, you have access to YouTube, you have access to all sorts of video sources. So let's just use them. And if you don't have access to any of those, your learners still have access to the best resource ever. You. More pausing. It's also okay to give your learners explicit instruction. So something I really like doing is showing my learners how I produce specific sounds. Sometimes, and I've done this with very young learners, I do the typical activity of bringing the mirrors and asking everybody to look at themselves, to see the shape of their lips, how, where the tip of the tongue touches, what the tip of the tongue touches. I think this type of explicit instruction on production, at least, is very feasible and really cool nowadays. I'm teaching online most days. Many of you might be teaching online. So the proximity of the camera really helps shape, really helps illustrate pronunciation. Like you can see the teacher up close. Well, not the eyes, but the mouth, the lips. And you can show quite a few things. It is important. I'm taking you through some sort of a cycle, right? The boxes on the right of your screen make up sort of a pronunciation teaching cycle, which you might follow, or you don't have to follow if you don't want. You can choose one or two. You don't have to embed every single step, every lesson. It really only depends on the target language that you're teaching. I love all the agree comments. I'm just gonna assume that you agree with everything I'm saying. Those people who say agree. Then the last one, give your learners feedback. Yes, feedback is so important. We've been thinking a lot about how learners get a sense of achievement and how they get a sense of progress, and feedback, teacher feedback and peer feedback plays a huge role in giving learners that sense of progress, highlighting strengths and highlighting areas for improvement is key. That is one of the foundational pillars. Foundational pillars. That's a bit of a synonym. Foundational pillars of teaching English. All right. So remember my game rules, because you're gonna need them at some point, I think. Good evening. Yes, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry for saying good evening. So pronunciation features, guys, I am gonna activate your brainstorm mode. Give me pronunciation features related to sounds, segments, supersegmentals, connected speech. Give me features. Just give me features. What do I mean by individual sounds? What do I mean by supersegmentals? What do I mean by connected speech? I see you. I see you in the chat box. Yes, ellipsis, schwa, vowels, consonants, diphthongs, ship, sheep, dialect, stress, intrusion. Wow, you give me the big ones. Deletion. Yes, minimal pairs, absolutely. Assimilation. Yeah, give me a lot of connected. Of course, I have connected speech there. Tongue twisters, elision. Yes, assimilation. I love assimilation. Elision. Itinerary, homophones, liaison, liaison. Connected speech, mimes and gestures, rising and falling intonation. Yes, juncture. Wow, triphthong, reduction, contractions, intonation, everything that ends in shun. Metaphor. Pronunciation is full of metaphors, by the way. Thank you for that one, but we're not going to see it here. Okay, cool. I'm going to show you the ones I have here, and I'm going to show you in groups. So the first group is basically about sounds, right? Things that you can look at, things that you can present and practice, consonant articulation, vowel length, the typical but also how vowel length is influenced by the following consonant, the voicing of the succeeding consonant. We also have, I know, right? Teacher must have an emotional and calm voice. I'm sure you're talking about me. Also, features related to suprasegmentals, like key info stress, thought group prominence, intonation, word stress, pausing, silences, rhythm. So many of these features resemble music so much. And that's really, really beautiful, because when you talk about pronunciation, phonetics, you're talking about the music of language. Oh, the person who was talking about metaphor. A metaphor. All right, the last group. Yes, pragmatic suprasegmentals. Suprasegmentals are super important for pragmatics, for emoting, for conveying emotion, right? So that's what I mean by pragmatic. Thought group unity. This is super important. Many of my learners find it difficult to put words belonging to a thought group together. So they would do things like, I want to go, instead of building the whole thought group together. And that's really, really important, because it helps you with rhythm in general. And L1, L2 contrasts. Some of you might choose to focus on that a little bit if you're able to anyway. You don't have to. Catenation, I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you. All right, let's move on now that we have some features. You can take photos, but I think you're going to get this presentation anyway. So have a think. Keep in your head a learner group. Think of a target language. It can be some target language. It can be some grammar, some vocabulary, or some pronunciation. I'm not going to choose pronunciation right now. And task types. I'm going to give you my own idea, my own suggestion. So I was teaching the other day, and by the other day, I mean really like last week, an intermediate adult student group. And they are speakers of Cantonese. The target language was narrative tenses, the typical contrast of past simple versus past continuous. I was walking down the street. I was walking down the street when I saw her. Yes. And yes, task types that group like pair or small group discussions, sharing with whole class, and podcasting. I'm starting to use podcasting after an idea I heard in Pronsig, IATEFL Pronsig conference, which I loved. More on that later. So my students are like this. You can see on my screen, they're studying that target language, and they normally do those activities. I normally think of objectives. Remember that this session is also about planning. So I'm thinking in terms of planning. I need an aim, and my aim needs to include the target language, a real life application, and a context. It can include other things, but these are the bare minimum. These are the foundational pillars. I want to keep using the same metaphors. The foundational pillars of your plan, of your aim, of your learning aim. Target language, real life application, and a context. We already know the target language for this one, but what about real life application and a context? I hope you are brainstorming over there, but I'm going to show you the ones I chose. Ta-da! So we think that my learners will be better able, or at least I want them to be better able to use this target language, past simple versus past perfect, meant past continuous. That's a mistake. Sentences. A real life application, a way they would use that language, that target language in life, to tell a short story about the past. And a context, where would they share a short story about the past? Well, maybe in the context of meeting old friends over Zoom, because people are not traveling a lot, so people are meeting up online quite often. That is a realistic context, and that's exactly what we want. But now that we have a real life application in our aim and a context, we need the pronunciation question. So here we are on the right hand side of the screen. You have the pronunciation question. What features, what pronunciation features and skills would they need to talk about, to tell us a short story about the past in the context of meeting old friends? So one idea is the one I keep repeating, I think. Yes, my eternal, my constant example this session, pausing between background event and main event, as in, I was walking down the street when I saw her. That might be a possibility. Any other possibility that you can think of, feel free to tell me. Ooh, past ed. Yes, the past, that past ed allomorph is super important. Thank you. I didn't even think about it. Yes, the allomorphs, the ed allomorphs, right? Yes, the ed past. Contractions, absolutely. A lot of people are giving me the ed endings. Someone told me intonation. Absolutely. Narrative intonation. Note that there is such a thing as narrative intonation. It is very variable though. But in telling a story, you do have a certain rhythm. So I was walking on the street when I saw the most beautiful muffin. I don't know. Yes. Oh, poem reciting. Oh, wow. That is a different context. I guess it depends on your group of learners. I typically tend to bring a real life application that's really, really feasible. And this is something that people do in teaching qualifications have to keep in mind. People do in teaching qualifications here, keep these elements of aims in mind. Yes, thank you. So many, so many. Yes, the weak forms about this session is not about weak forms, but I do have something to say about weak forms. If you get your learners to practice thought groups, to practice unity of thought groups, to utter, to pronounce complete whole chunks, whole thought groups, they'll be practicing almost automatically, they'll be practicing weak forms because they'll be putting things together and they'll be using prominence, they'll be stressing only the keywords. So weak form work is more or less automatic if you get your learners to work on thought groups. Just an idea. Feel free to totally disagree. Okay, so we have one more example. I'm going to show you this one. Now that we have some features in mind, let's bring the game rules back. So there you have them. Yes, the same game rules we had before. And I have some ideas for some of the steps. Have a look. So I wonder, oh, I didn't show you the target language for this one, sorry. So the target language for this one is oh, it's the same example. Yes, it's the example with past simple and past continuous. So raise learners' awareness of pron features. Well, show them how other speakers do it. Bring a recording, show videos, do it yourself, get them to listen to each other. Whatever method you follow to raise your students' awareness is okay. Then learners listen to conversations to determine whether the speakers used the pausing. Notice that my fixation today is pausing, but this applies to any feature, any of the features we had before. Present and model how you would introduce pauses between background and main event. So this is the explicit instruction. Show it, model it, do it, play a recording, play the video. Then get learners to control practice a little bit, give them a situation perhaps, or just get them to actually repeat the sentences, but our instinct is to try and keep it as communicative as possible, to keep the feature and the practice, even if controlled, as communicative as possible. And finally, do delayed error correction. I do have a few questions. At least I have one question for you. So I'm gonna launch one little poll and I want your answers. There's no correct answer. I just want to know that you're still there. I'm gonna launch it and you can start answering now. The question is, do we always need to raise learners' awareness of a pronunciation feature? I'm gonna give you a few seconds to answer. I love how every single option has lots of supporters. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop them. I'm gonna end the poll and I'm gonna show you what I got. Yes, I think you can see it now. It's a little bit unfair, and it's a bit of a trick question because it depends. Is sort of an umbrella, right? It depends covers a lot. But to be fair, it really depends. But it is a good idea to raise learners' awareness of a feature. As long, what you don't need to do is talk about phonetic terminology, but you can talk about how lips move. Oh, look how, can you see my lips when I say moon? Ooh, look at my lips. They're very funny. Look, ooh, and try to do it yourself. Ooh, you don't have to do it, just a model. But that goes to say that you can illustrate a feature that has a very fine, very refined phonetic term in very physical, very earthly ways. I'm gonna stop sharing. I have another question for you guys, ladies and gentlemen. The question is, can we, what game rules from here, from these ones, can we skip? I'm launching now. I'm launching my poll now, and you can answer. What game rule can we skip? This one is taking a bit longer to process. You're right. Some learners don't feel too comfortable when we pay attention too much to their pronunciation. That's so true. And something to do about that is to focus on somebody else's pronunciation, to focus on someone in a video, or bring a movie, or stream some video, or record somebody else that you know, or record yourself. Make your video, make your recording, produce your material. Use your phone, use Vocaroo, vocaroo.com. Okay. I love the answers though. It shows that you're thinking hard about all this. Although one option is taking the lead, and I like that. So I'm gonna end the poll. I'm sorry guys if you didn't participate. And I'm gonna share the results. It's very interesting that you've decided that giving feedback is skippable. I would say, I would recommend not skipping feedback. I'm not calling you out. I'm not calling you out at all. I'm just saying that giving feedback, or giving some sort of feedback somehow, somewhere, sometime, is important, because you need to highlight that students did something well, or you need to highlight that something has to improve. Okay. Of course, it also depends on your students and how they're responding, how they respond to feedback in general. And you can devise alternative methods of giving feedback. You don't have to mention anybody. You can just say, people, these features are important, and they're the features that you noticed can be improved in class. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Yeah, as a student, I was terrified all the time, every time the teacher said, well, Victor, I don't like it, so I identify with that. All right, just a few more things. I had another example. I want to leave some time for questions, so I'm only gonna tell you very briefly. This is just me going through the process again. This time I have teenagers at the B1 proficiency level. Their L1 is Cantonese, again, because I'm in Hong Kong. Hi, Hong Kong people, and hi from Hong Kong. The target language was second conditional, and it's imaginary situations in the present or the future, like, if I drink water, if I drank water now, I would satisfy my thirst, or whatever. I have an example here. Task types that they like: very scaffolded pair and small group work. They need access to functional language and discussion tasks because they're not true B1s. I think their level is slightly lower than that. So some highly interactive activities are very hard for them. So this is what I thought for the aim. My learners would be better able to use second conditional sentences. You can put an example. If you're doing Delta or Trinity Dip TESOL, you have to put an example. To talk about things they would change in their lives, and the context is negotiating chores with parents and teachers, which is possibly a common thing if your household is not a dictatorship, which mine was. So the question is pronunciation. What pronunciation features can we think about here? Negotiating with parents. If I did my homework on time, if I completed my homework, I'd go out, or I'd do whatever else. I wonder if clausal intonation would be a good pronunciation point to focus on. Because you have that typical intonation of conditionals, right? Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. So I think intonation is actually important in conditionals. I'd go outside. Okay, Dad. If I completed the homework, I'm not saying I will. If I completed the homework, I'd go outside and play afterwards. I like that. All right, guys, we are very close to the end. I'm not going to ask to make more decisions because I really want to answer a few questions. What I want to, I'm going to give you something at the end. I'm going to give you a little quiz, which you can complete. And I'm going to show you some of the activities that you've left on my Padlet. So you can take my quiz about this session after the session. The quiz will help you remember. It will help you revise the information I've given you. I've relentlessly talked about pronunciation and lesson planning. But if you complete the quiz, you can check your knowledge. You can check whatever you got and everything you got from this session. I want to share a few things before you go. IATEFL PronSIC, the pronunciation special interest group, they always have amazing pronunciation teaching activities. Go right now and follow them on every social media channel. They are amazing, and not only because I'm a member, but because they are. And their guests and experts are amazing. British Council, follow their website. I also have it here. Just to remind people, got out of my presentation, why? I was so excitedly speaking about British Council that I got out of my presentation. Yes, I'm still there. Okay, cool. Finally, I'm just gonna show you the ideas that you've put on my Padlet. But I think that's pretty much all I have to say, everybody. I don't know if there are any questions, Paul.
There are some questions, yes.
Oh God, okay.
No. It's okay. They're not too many. We haven't actually got very long. There was one actually, an interesting one. There are a few in the Q&A, but there's also one on Facebook which I wanted to discuss, which I thought is quite interesting. So it's around native speakerism. And the question, I can't remember who it's from. I do apologize, person on Facebook who put this question. Okay, so for native-like pronunciation in English, how can the learners get rid of the influence of their mother tongue? Have you got any guidelines? And that sort of made me think, do we want them to get rid of the influence of their mother tongue? I'm kind of thinking not, but I just wondered what your take was on that, Victor.
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you, anonymous user. I agree. I'm gonna go for the most common comment in the chat box. I agree. I think your accent is a marker of identity. It's part of who you are. You're learning a second language and you're bound to bring the features of your L1. And the combination is a superpower. It demonstrates that you have an additional skill. So I think it's important for us all to value the elements of our identity in our accents. Our L1 accents in L2 are part of that.
Mm-hmm. Good. No, I would agree as well. I think often, I mean, for me, it feels like sometimes when someone feels that they need to sound native speakery, if you like. I know that's sort of a bad word these days, and rightly so, but they kind of tend to, I don't know, think that the sort of received pronunciation, like sort of the English person who speaks properly, if you like, sort of that kind of accent is the accent that they need to go for. But obviously in the UK, I mean, there were so many different accents, and I agree. I mean, I think the identity of your sort of mother tongue, the accent is absolutely something that you want to keep and use that and bring that into the English. So good. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question. It was Manzurul Islam. Sorry about the pronunciation there, Manzurul. But there's a question from him. So there you go. There's your answer. You don't need to get rid of the influence of your mother tongue. Okay, another question. I'm just trying to find. There's a few in the Q&A. Okay, question from Mark Hopkinson. Aspects of pronunciation do you find most difficult to teach to Hong Kong learners?
That's an interesting one because it really depends on the type of course I teach. If it's general English, I tend to focus a lot on rhythm, the overall rhythm of a thought group. That doesn't mean that if my students don't control clause rhythm, they're not understood. You know what I mean? I'm not correcting a mistake. I'm only adding more to what they already bring. So I focus a lot on rhythm because sometimes it does, having an extremely monotone delivery does take away from general understanding, general comprehension. So yeah, I do think rhythm is something that I work on a lot here in Hong Kong.
Okay. Possibly one more question if you've got time, Victor. Almudena Santos in Spain, I imagine, is asking, how can we avoid learners being embarrassed when they practice English sounds? Sometimes it's, I mean, and I kind of understand that there's a certain amount of embarrassment in terms from standing up and pronouncing the sounds, or working on pronunciation, perhaps. Is that quite typical? She's asking, and how can we? Is there any strategy for avoiding that embarrassment?
So what I tend to do, I do a lot of the things that I wish my teachers had done back when. I usually try to scaffold interaction a lot, and I hardly ever nominate students to practice something that they haven't practiced before with a partner.
Mhm.
So I usually follow that sort of sequence. First, they need to try their hand at something individually, then they try it with somebody else, and then maybe I'd ask in whole, open class manner, but it's not very usual in my. So that's a way of just developing confidence step by step.
Mhm. Okay, great, thank you. Any more questions? Maybe one more. Okay, you must have mentioned, yeah, lingua franca core rules. Where would someone go to find those if they wanted to?
Literature about lingua franca core, Jennifer Jenkins, abounds on the internet. Search,
Yeah.
Google, you'll find lots of papers and lots of free articles to check.
Okay, great. All right, I think probably, I don't know if we're going to have time for any more questions, so apologies to people who have put questions in. I noticed there's a few about certificates, Lucas and Wala. Yes, at the beginning I did mention certificates. I've also been putting in links in the chat to the certificate, which maybe you can't access. There is a certificate. If you wait until this time tomorrow, you will get an email which will have the link to the certificate and how you can access that. Also, if you complete the feedback survey, which should hopefully automatically open on your screen when the webinar finishes, at the end of the feedback survey, there's a link to the certificate there. So yes, hopefully that answers that question. Victor, thanks ever so much. It was really engaging, really interesting, and really enjoyable as well. Really enjoyed that, so thank you. And we've had a huge, I mean, the chat's been just going constantly on Zoom and also on Facebook, actually. So it's been fantastic. Lots and lots of people commenting and lots of positive comments as well. So thank you ever so much. And hopefully we'll see you again. We'd love you to come back.
Yes, thank you for having me. Teaching English, please invite me again.
We will. We will. Thanks, Victor. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you all.